Well, starting off the news this hour, a federal district court in San Francisco is hearing the case today of a woman who has been fighting to remove her name from the terror watch list for over 8 years now. It's a list that's easy to get your name on, but almost impossible to get off of. Stanford University PhD student Rahinah Ibrahim was boarding a flight home to Malaysia from the San Francisco International Airport in 2005 when authorities arrested her. They told her she was on the terror watch list. Now, eventually, Mrs. Ibrahim was allowed to travel again, but her student her student visa was revoked, and she was not allowed back in the U.S. The evidence levied against her is unclear at this point, and the government argues that revealing the information that put her on that list would jeopardize national security. And Mrs. Ibrahim is not alone. By the end of last year, the U.S. database of potential international terrorists, known as the Terrorist Identities Datamart environment, or TIDE, had 875,000 names on it. That's up from 740,000 names in just the year before that. Because the list includes multiple aliases, there are fewer individuals than there are actual names on that list. But nevertheless, a huge number of people are affected. And the TIDE list just feeds the master terrorist watch list that's run by the FBI, which adds in potential domestic terrorists to that list as well. However, critics argue that the list is not effective. Tamerlan Tsarnaev, for instance, he's one of the Boston bombers, was on the list for years, yet authorities failed to prevent that attack. Here to discuss the effectiveness of the terror watch list is Munia Jabbar, a civil rights attorney at CAIR. Thank you so much for joining me. Now, first of all, let's start talking about how you get your name on that list. Is there any bona fide way that will tell them you're on that list?
Well, the government doesn't reveal officially to people whether they are on the list. And what we see usually happen is that a federal law enforcement agency may, quote unquote, nominate people, including U.S. citizens, to the watch list and then never reveal the reason for being included on the watch list or even officially let them know that they are on the list. And there's just not really any surefire way of these people finding out why they ended up on the list in the first place.
And as I understand it, Muslim-sounding names are more likely to be on that watch list. Is that because they are credible threats, or is that because it's more of a stereotype?
Well, there's no reason to believe that just because somebody has a Muslim name or a Muslim-sounding name that they are more likely to be a threat in any kind of way. In the experience of the civil rights legal community, we are seeing that the list is far disproportionately affecting people with Muslim-sounding names. So as far as we can tell, there is some type of religious profiling going on that leads to the compilation of the list.
And would you be able to distinguish for us the difference between the terror watch list and the no-fly list?
Sure. So the no-fly list is actually a subcomponent of the greater terror watch list. The no-fly list is a list that if you are unlucky to end up on it for some reason, it means that you cannot fly in or out of a U.S. airport, and generally it means that you can't even board a flight that's going to cross U.S. airspace. And in practice, it also means that other types of transportation are also close to you. For example, non-U.S. countries, many of them use some form of the U.S. no-fly list to bar people from flying. We've also seen indications that the list is given out to ship captains, and that prevents people from also boarding boats and ships to try to travel.
Sure. Now, we've heard of law enforcement and federal agencies using racial profiling in the past. Take, for instance, the surveillance of the mosques in New York City. And that policy of racial profiling was actually very popular among New Yorkers. So is that reason enough to continue these practices because there's not enough pushback?
There is not really any good reason to continue racial or religious profiling in order to compile this list because, as you mentioned earlier, we haven't seen any reason that it is effective. There are people who are threats who, for example, the Boston bombers, who maybe could have been caught if law enforcement were able to be given the leeway to focus on other indications that somebody is a threat besides some of the lists that are derivative of the greater greater terrorist watch list. At the same time, we are seeing the rights of innocent people being infringed every day because they are placed on the watch list for no reason. So, for example, a lot of these people can't fly to attend to business matters, to attend to personal matters such as funerals, and it can be really heartbreaking for these people.
And are there any known cases where the terror watch list has, in fact, produced results?
Not that I can tell you off the top of my head, and I'm not going to say 100% that there are not cases where some derivative of the watch list did legitimately aid law enforcement, but the problem that we're seeing right now is that there's just far too much error. The watch list obviously is not 100% helping us catch legitimate threats, but the watch list is also catching too many false positives. Too many innocent people are being put on the list and affected, and they just don't know why.
And we have just about 30 seconds left, but what about similar names between two people, say two Meghan Lopez's, for instance?
Unfortunately, that can definitely lead to a problem. So, for example, if there is a Meghan Lopez who has legitimately aided, or not legitimately, but has actually engaged in some kind of wrongdoing, if you maybe have a similar birthday to her, there is a chance, definitely, that at an airport you would accidentally be flagged as that person and falsely identified as a threat, and maybe not even allowed to board the plane.
It's a very scary notion indeed, that a simple name can get you on a list that could potentially have the government watching you. Munia Jabbar, civil rights attorney for CAIR, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.